Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my late review of Overlord. I played it on the PC. It's also available on the Xbox 360 and PS3. You cannot play it on the Xbox One via backwards compatibility in the US. Yeah, believe me, I tried. That was my go-to because this game came out back on like the PS3 360 era, and you know, I figured with backwards compatibility, since it pops up in the Xbox One store, I'd be able to. But no, it is region locked for download for whatever reason. So let's get into the story. You play as a nameless character who is brought back from the dead by a group of minions to become their new overlord. It is your job to basically take control of the land and, you know, take down the heroes of the land because you're an overlord. You're not necessarily a good guy or a bad guy, you get to choose. There are points in the game where you can choose to be a more benevolent overlord or a more evil overlord. I do enjoy it in the game. I don't think it's necessarily the best execution of a morality system I've ever seen, but it's not bad, and I enjoy the story of the game because a lot of the things that happen are kind of tongue-in-cheek and jokey and funny, which will bleed into the audio right now, and I like the voiceover work for the most part and the scripting in this game because it is pretty funny. This is not a game that takes itself seriously, and you see that in the writing mostly, and the voice acting is very much hit or miss. There are some voice actors who do better jobs than others. I wouldn't say any of them are truly stellar, but some of them are also a little more cartoony than others, and some of them are just not very good. As for the music, I enjoy the music in this game. I think it's good. It's not necessarily the most memorable music I've ever heard in a video game, but it works. As for the rest of the sound effects, I like the sound effects in this game. I like all the sound effects for the minions and for when they're fighting, when they're destroying things. I like the ambient noises, the noises for the animals, the creatures, etc. Now let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is a third-person action RPG RTS kind of game. When you are controlling the Overlord, you can do physical attacks, you can do magic, you can do things like that in order to more or less support your minions. They are your main weapon. And your minions break down into browns, greens, reds, and blues. Browns are your melee guys, reds are your fire-based ranged attackers, greens are stealthy, stabby, assassin-y type guys, and blue are really bad at attacking. They're mostly magical, and they're mostly used for reviving other minions, but they don't work as well as the other three because they are in fact so weak that they tend to die a little too easily. But you can control each group individually as needed, or you can send them all in as a giant horde to battle whatever you are up against. The RPG elements come from finding items and upgrading your armor. You find items that will give you new spells, better spells, increase your mana, your health, etc. You use gold and you sacrifice minions in order to forge better armor and upgrade said armor. It's a zone-based game, not necessarily open world, although you can freely explore each zone, and they do tie into each other and feed into each other as well as they can. There's one zone that does not feed into the rest, and that's fine. It's still easy to get to. It's very much a mission-based game. You can get a bunch of different missions at a time, and you can choose to tackle them however you feel like. Or whenever you feel like, I should say. I mean, it's not the most diverse game. It's not like you can take a stealth approach or an aggressive approach, etc. Let's get into the controls, which I will say overall work well. I do think that the way the controls are laid out, it works for the most part. The way you move, the way you select your minions, your spells, etc., I think that all works. There is no camera control. You use the right stick to basically sweep the minions around rather than just lock on and attack. You can do both of those things, but the right stick being used for that means you have extremely limited camera control. There are times where you really kind of fight the camera. It's a greater enemy than the enemies. And while sweeping the right stick for the minions, it works and it's cool and it's beneficial at times. Another thing that would be super beneficial at times would be controlling the camera. Now, I mentioned there is a lock-on, and the lock-on is pretty good for the most part. I do wish, however, you had the ability to switch what you are targeted to. There is kind of a way to do it, but it's finicky and it doesn't work well. You use the left trigger to lock on, and you can release and hold it back down quickly, and that'll switch to something else, but it doesn't always work well, and I just wish there was a easier way to switch between targets while remaining locked on. I do think those things, they do negatively impact the game as a whole. They make it difficult to target what you're trying to target. They make it difficult to see your enemies a lot of the times. I'm sure in some of the footage I have, you're gonna see, you know, not the combat because I couldn't get the camera where I wanted it to be at the time. And then lastly, the graphics. Now, while this is a cartoony game, and I will generally say that cartoony games hold up better, this one has aged pretty roughly. Not that it's necessarily a horrible looking game, because it is a cartoony looking game, and that generally, it does age better. But the textures, just, you know, in general, a lot of that is just not as good as it could be, and doesn't necessarily hold up like you might want it to. I like the design of the minions in this game. I've always liked them. In my mind, when I hear the word minions, I think of these guys. I think the design is cool, and I like the fact that the browns, greens, reds, and blues all have slightly different designs, and I think that's neat. I think the fact that you can get armor that will both affect the gameplay as well as the look of your minions is cool. The Overlord is a pretty stereotypical badass evil looking Overlord, and I think it looks cool. I like the design of the world, the creatures, you know, the people in it. I think it all sticks with that cartoonier theme, and I like that it's bright and colorful. That's something that I just enjoy because there are so many games that don't do that. I think the animations are really fun and they fit with this game. Just overall, I like the art style, and while the graphics don't necessarily hold up as well as they could, I like the overall design. So that all being said, I do enjoy this game, and I will say that, I mean, it's a throwback for me. There's a bit of nostalgia for me. There's no arguing that. But I do feel like there is still fun to be had in this game, despite its flaws. It may not be for everyone, but if you'd like to go back and play it, I say it's worth it, especially since it's not a crazy expensive game anymore. You can get it on Steam for fairly cheap, and it goes on sale on Steam pretty regularly. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me what your favorite RTS game is? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button, and if you like what I'm doing in general, share, subscribe. Have a good one. So let's get into it. You play as a nameless character who is basically brought back from the dead. Another thing that would be...